Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Slay. I am one of the co-founders of AWL Partners, and here is the other co-founder who can introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Melissa Maloney. I am the other co founder of AWL Partners. We are excited that you are experiencing our first LinkedIn Live with us today.
Yes, yes. And today we're going to be talking about how to manage the inner critic. But we call this is our first of the double take series. And the reason we call it double take is because we approach our business from two perspectives, as most people do. But there's the business expertise, who is Mel, who is like a guru, an amazing, phenomenal expert in what she does. And then there's me, and I am a social worker. I've been a social worker for the last 27 years. Oh my gosh.
Aging
And
yourself.
I know.
10 years.
I
10
can't believe
years.
I can be an adult. I've been an adult that long. That's the thing that gets me every time I say 27 years. Anyways, what we're going to be doing is we're going to really be supporting people in their business journey. This is going to be an 8-week series on Tuesdays at noon, from noon to 12:30. And we're going to really help support people with regards to mindset, with regards to business strategy, with regards to a whole bunch of things. Today, specifically, we're talking about how to manage the inner critic. And what we're hoping is that we can support you um, to really check your mindset and support you in meeting your goals. Because essentially that's what you want. You want to meet your goals that produces you with those happy feelings inside, right? So we want to make sure that you get a taste of how to work with us, right? And with our coaching, with our training, with our workshops, we bring a lot of energy, we bring a lot of depth, and we bring a lot of humor. We like to have fun. So, what you can expect every week is a relatable topic that's actually useful. You will walk away with strategies that you can implement right away, a deeper understanding of yourself and others, because if you can understand yourself, you're halfway there. Okay. It's that awareness piece. And at least one tool, like I said, that you can apply immediately. Have you gone to those talks before or those workshops and you're excited and then you walk away and you have no idea what to do next? That's not us. You're going to know exactly what to do. And we're going to provide you with space to reflect, recharge, and reconnect to your purpose. So if you have any questions throughout our time, please throw them in the chat. Melissa is going to go off camera in a moment, and she's going to be monitoring the chat, making sure that she answers your questions. And any questions that are directed for me, I will make sure to answer right afterwards. Okay. So thank you, Mel. Okay, so let me share the screen because there's some slides that we're going to support you with this today. Okay. Now, the inner critic, one of my favorite topics to talk about. It's that internal voice that we all have, every single one of us, that judges us, that instills some doubt, that can criticize you, especially when you're trying to grow. Right? Especially when you're trying to grow, when you're trying to take risks, when you're trying to step outside of that comfort zone. And it can often sound like, hey, you know what? You're not good enough. You always mess this up. Who do you think you are to try this? Right? Have you had those messages before? Have you thought those things before? And the thing is, psychologically, this voice is really rooted in self protection. It's not inherently evil, right? It's developed there to keep you safe. But what it protects us from isn't always real danger. Our brains, as sophisticated as they are, can't tell the difference between when we're running from a saber-toothed tiger and when we're running from judgment of peers, right? Both things produce that same fear, that fear of failure, that fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, right? So we're going to really get into talking about the inner critic. So let's try to understand this inner critic a little bit more, right? There's the mind, body, spirit connection, and that really shapes our self-perception. So our thoughts, they don't live in a vacuum. Okay. They're embodied and they're influenced by our physical and our spiritual states. And so this is how they're connected. So your mind, that's the inner narrative, the things that we tell ourselves, right? What we think. And that can affect how we see ourselves, how we act, right? Our body the physical health. And it needs sleep, it needs exercise and diet. And and when we don't get those things, what it does is it can impact our cognitive clarity, our emotional regulation, right? It's harder to really manage ourselves. Have you felt angry before, right? Then you know that your patience level goes down, right? So chronic stress can raise our cortisol, which primes the brain for that fear-based thinking. And then there's the spirit, our deeper sense of purpose, our meaning, our connectedness to something that's bigger than ourselves. And that can influence our resilience and belief in possibility. So these connections, they're all intertwined. When we're thinking negative thoughts, then we don't feel like doing anything, right? And we're kind of slumped and our spirit is at a low vibration. And then we're just like lumps on a log, right? And we don't do anything. And then that impacts our bodies. So, and then we don't have the energy. So it's all interconnected, right? When one part is out of alignment, our perception is skewed. And if you're sleep deprived, if you're under stress, if you're disconnected from your values, then your inner critic gets louder and more convincing, right? We start believing the stories that we tell ourselves. The inner critic is linked to neuroscience and past conditioning, right? So if we think of this from a neuroscience type of perspective, our amygdala, which is like our smoke alarm, right? Um, it's our brain's threat detector. And it's activated when we feel vulnerable. Okay. Have you felt vulnerable before? I'm sure you have. And that vulnerability can trigger our inner critic to speak up, like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. You'll embarrass yourself. And then over time, we internalize those voices from early authority figures, like our parents, our teachers, our peers, and especially those that were critical or shaming or dismissive. And these voices can form some core beliefs like, I'm not enough, or I shouldn't speak up, or I'll fail if I try. And this can become that automated loop, a neural pathway that fires quickly unless we learn to interrupt it, right? By awareness and by new habits. Okay. So we're just talking a little bit about how to understand this inner critic. Because if you can understand it and you understand why it's doing what it's doing, then you're able to overcome it, right? So what the inner critic also does is it's trying to protect us. But while it's trying to protect us, it can hinder our growth. It's not always malicious. It really, really isn't. Its root purpose is to provide safety. If I don't try it, I can't fail. If I stay quiet, I won't be judged. If I don't ask, I won't be rejected, right? And so it's that safety piece. But this perceived protection comes at a cost, stagnation. Have you ever seen a body of water that's just stagnant? What does that look like? What does that smell like? Right? There's lots of bugs, bacteria, all of this kind of stuff. We don't want to be stagnant, right? We want to keep going. We want to flow. And so when we give the inner critic full control, we avoid challenges that can foster growth. We miss out on opportunities for connection and for impact. And then we stay stuck in really outdated narratives. So, what we want to do instead of silencing the inner critic, we want to thank it for trying to help. And then we want to redirect it. And this turns an internal enemy into an inner advisor with boundaries. Okay. So, something to remember is your perception of something or the story that you're telling yourself, that doesn't mean it's true, right? Your perception does not equal truth. So, just because you think something doesn't mean that it's true. Your perception is shaped by your past experiences, by your trauma, by cultural norms, and even your mood. So, the truth is often more balanced. It's usually more compassionate and constructive than what the inner critic is going to say. So we want to try a mantra, right? When that inner critic starts up, we want to say, you know what? That's a thought, not a fact. So if you're watching chat, put in the chat, that's a thought, not a fact, right? We want to remember it's a thought, not a fact. So, what does your inner critic say when you're about to step up as a leader, when you're about to do something new for the first time? What are some of the things that your inner critic says to you? Whose voice does it sound like? Because that inner critic tends to have a voice that's similar to maybe a past voice that was really critical, right? And then think, what would a wiser, kinder voice say instead, right? So ask yourself these questions when the inner critic comes up. I'll just repeat them for you. What is it that your inner critic is saying? You have to be aware. So what is it that your inner critic is saying when you're trying to do something new? Whose voice does it actually sound like? And what would a wiser, kinder voice say to you instead? Okay. All right. So once we're able to do that, once we're able to recognize it, then we want to interrupt that negative self talk. Okay. So there's a few steps here, and we're going to go through a few steps. Okay. There's 5 steps. So, step one, you want to recognize it in real time. That negative self talk, it's often automatic and it's often subconscious. You don't even realize that you're thinking them, right? And that's why you have to be intentional about thinking about it. Be intentional about thinking about what you don't know you're thinking about. Okay. So, the first step really is to just bring things into your awareness. Okay. So, the way you can do that is notice those physical cues. What happens when you feel anxious? What happens when you're trying to start something new? For me, my muscles get tight, right? It could be that there's tightness in your chest or a clenched jaw or maybe fast heart rate. Some people say their palms get sweaty, right? What is it for you? What are the physical cues for yourself? And then identify the tone of the inner critic. What tone is it making? Is it harsh? Is it absolutist? Like, is it that always or never? Are you saying, I always do this or I never do this? Because that's rarely true. It's rarely true. And are you catastrophizing? Right? So you want to label it. That's my inner critic speaking right now. In fact, give your inner critic a name, right? Mine is Bertha. So, hey, Bertha, that's Bertha speaking right now. That's not Jen, that's Bertha speaking right now. Okay. And start noticing, right? I'm noticing I'm having the thought that. Be intentional about saying exactly what it is the thought is that you're having. Okay. Because what that does is it creates this psychological distance between the thought and your identity. Okay. So we want to make sure that we're not identifying as what the thought is. We just want to be aware of it and create that psychological distance. Then the second step is to thank it and reframe. So once you recognize it, the next move is to be compassionate and redirect. Have that compassionate redirection. So the inner critic often believes it's protecting you. So instead of battling it, thank it for its concern. Thanks for trying to protect me, but I got this. I got this. I hear you, but I'm choosing courage over comfort, right? Courage over comfort. And then reframe using evidence. Is this thought 100% true? Is it 80% true? Is it even 10% true, right? Would I say this to a friend? And what's a more helpful way to view this? So these techniques, they're grounded in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and a self-distancing effect because we want to distance ourselves from the thought. Okay. The next step is mindful, being very mindful. Okay. So self talk is also felt in the body, like I mentioned before. So you want to use some somatic techniques to reset your nervous system, right? I call it the window, and I know others have called it the window as well. From when something happens to the action, there's a window. And we want to make that window a bit longer so that we have time to think. Because what happens is everything comes into our brain and we're going to feel it before we have time to think. And oftentimes we're reacting instead of responding. So we want to create a window so that we can think. What was the way to do that? One of the ways is to box breathe. So you inhale air for 4 seconds, hold it there for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and hold there for 4 seconds. And then just do that a few times, right? To get yourself back to a place of regulation where you're able to think. Right? Because what's happening when your amygdala is going off, you're getting in that fight or flight mode, right? You're ready to go, right? Because it's that survival thing. But we want to create some space, right? We want to do some grounding. You can do grounding, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. So you name 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, 2 things you taste, one thing, right? So you're just doing that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and getting your whole body involved in that. Another way to become, and the reason I'm giving you a number of different techniques is just so that, because not everything works for everyone, right? So if you have some choices, then you can choose what works for you. You can do progressive muscle relaxation. And what that means is that you're tightening your muscles progressively. So you can either start with your toes or you can start up at your neck, wherever you want to start, but you're purposely for a few seconds tightening and then letting go. And you're doing it for different sections of your body. Your arm, you're tightening and you're letting go. Your legs, you're tightening and you're letting go. And what that does is it lowers the cortisol and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, right? And what this does is it helps you to practice to move from the fight and flight, that amygdala, to rest and reflect in that prefrontal cortex. That's where the rational thought lives, okay? Your next step is to anchor with habits. That negative self talk is worse when we're depleted. Right? That's like, remember when I said hangry? How do you act when you're hangry? Right? So, what research shows is that the lack of sleep increases the threat perception and emotional reactivity. Poor nutrition, especially when our blood sugar crashes, it can really disrupt our mood and our energy. And then inactivity can impair our executive function and our emotional regulation. So, what we want to do is build routines into our life that will build our internal capacity to be able to respond as opposed to react. Get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Try to eat protein and fiber rich meals, right? Move even 10 minutes a day. Walking will improve your mood and your cognition. And then the last step, which I encourage all of my clients to do, is to journal in order to rewire the story. Okay. And now I know a lot of my clients said, I don't know what to write when I'm journaling. Give yourself some prompts, but you want to get what's in your head out. It needs to come out. So a prompt could be, what did I say to myself today that I wouldn't say to someone that I love? What's the truth that deserves more space? Remember, we're separating fact from fiction. We're separating the story from the truth. So, what's the truth that deserves more space? What writing does is it engages different parts of the brain and it increases insight, empathy, and intentionality. Right? Okay. Okay, so I talked to you a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's really one of the most effective evidence-based tools for improving your mental health, especially when it comes to anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. At its core, cognitive behavioral therapy, it's based on one powerful idea. Ready? One powerful idea. Your thoughts influence your feelings, which influences your actions, which influences your outcome. So if you change your thoughts, you can change your experience. That's it. If you change your thoughts, you can change your experience. So the 3-step process: catch, challenge, change. I don't know if I used to watch A Different World when I was a kid. It was a spin-off from Cosby Show. Do you remember that episode, for those of you who watched it, where Whitley was going to a therapist and the therapist said to her, "Okay, so we're going to do this relax, relate, release. Relax, relate, release," right? Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to catch, challenge, change. Catch, challenge, change, right? It helps you to break the loop of negative thinking. So you catch the thought. And this is about becoming aware of what you're saying to yourself. What was I thinking just now? What triggered this thought? How did I feel right after? Okay. Because these thoughts are often automatic and they're often judgmental. I'm not good enough. I always screw this up. They probably think I'm incompetent, right? Thing is, you don't want to judge. You don't want to judge the thought. You just want to notice it. Okay. You don't want to judge it. You just want to notice it. And this is about building self awareness, not shame. Then you want to challenge its validity. Now that you've identified the thought, ask yourself whether it's actually true. Okay. Or is it just the story that your inner critic is telling? And you can use these questions, right? Is there any real evidence for this? Am I jumping to conclusions or am I catastrophizing? Would I say this to a friend in the same situation? What's a more balanced or neutral way to look at this? So, what cognitive behavioral therapy teaches us is that thoughts are not facts. Just because you think something doesn't mean it's accurate. So, if you're thinking, oh man, I'm terrible at giving presentations, then challenge it. I've had some tough ones, but I've also received positive feedback before. So maybe I'm not as bad as I think. Okay. And then you're changing the thought. So remember, we catch, we challenge, and we change the thought. And this is where you replace the original negative thought with one that's realistic and one that's kind, right? Not overly positive or fake, just truthful and supportive. We're not wanting the positive toxicity, but we just want to be able to reframe. So if you're saying, I'm a failure, instead try, I'm learning, and this is part of the process. Failure is part of the process. I'm not smart enough. Instead, this is a challenge, but I can figure it out or ask for help. I never get it right. Instead, I've made mistakes, but I've also succeeded before. Again, this reframe, it's not toxic positivity. It's self-compassion rooted in truth. So practice challenging yourself, catching, challenging, and changing. Okay. The reason why this is so important, right, is because we can be our own worst enemies and we can stop ourselves from experiencing the life that we really, really want. We can be the ones challenging our happiness, not allowing ourselves to live the life that we dream of having. We all have that ability. Okay. So, what neuroscience shows is that repeated thought patterns create neural pathways. And so, by reframing regularly, you can begin to rewire your brain for more adaptive thinking. And that's what we want to do. Okay. Okay. So here's what you're going to do. Here's your homework. I'm going to start with a story and then just tell me, in the chat, email us, whatever it is, once we get to because you're going to practice this catch, challenge, change. All right. I remember every time I would get up to speak in front of a crowd, even now, right? My stomach does this little flip, right? And you'd think that I would get over it, that I wouldn't be nervous talking in front of people because I do it for a living, right? You'd kind of wonder, why did I choose this for a living? If I'm constantly feeling that nervousness, but that nervous energy is a good thing. That discomfort is a good thing. It means I care, right? I believe that the outcome is far greater than the fear. So when I was a kid, I was in a piano recital and I had a memory lapse right there on stage. I was playing my cute little song, and about 4 or 5 bars in, measure 4 or 5 measures in, I could not remember what the next part of the song was. It was so bad that my dad had to come up to the stage, give me my music, and then I had to start all over again. I was mortified. I was 6 years old. I was mortified. I still remember it. I still remember the stage. I remember everything. Okay. So now, ever since then, I tell myself, okay, I've got memory issues. I tell myself, I hear myself say it. And so every time I get up to speak, I have to remind myself because that little voice tries to creep in. What if you forget something? What if you freeze? And I have to do that catch, challenge, change, right? I notice the thought. Okay, here's that old memory again, right? Of when I was 6 years old. And then I challenge myself and I have to ask myself, is this the whole truth or an exaggerated version of the truth? Sure, I forgot my music once when I was 6 years old, but since then I've spoken countless times, and most of the times it went really well. And then I change, reframe it. Even if I do blank out, I know how to recover. I've done this 100 times. I can do it before, I can do it again, right? So sometimes the thought has a nugget of truth in it, right? It does, but it's an exaggerated version of the truth. And that's why we've got to challenge it and bring it back down to reality. Otherwise, it's going to run the show. So remember, catch, challenge, change. Catch, challenge, change. All right. Okay. So you're going to do this for yourself. Okay. Write down 3 recurring self-critical thoughts that you have, and then beside it, reframe it to a kinder or more accurate statement and use that catch, challenge, change model to guide you. Right? All right. So, some key takeaways from today. Your inner critic is trying to help you, but it needs boundaries. Okay. Self awareness and intentional habits will shape your self talk. And using cognitive behavioral therapy and using mindfulness techniques is going to help shift your inner narrative. Okay. All right. So, whoops. I hope you enjoyed your time with us today. Double Take again is myself and Melissa Maloney. And the next one is next Tuesday, July 22nd, where Melissa is going to be speaking to you about process equals power, systems that set you up for success. Then the week after, I'll be back talking about empathy and how to lead with empathy, the secret skill you're not using enough. And then Melissa will be back in August to talk about how to say it clearly, how to set expectations that actually stick. All right. So, Melissa, I don't know if we had any questions or anything. We've got 3 minutes.
There are currently no questions. Lots of people liking things and engaging.
Awesome.
Currently no questions though, but if people have questions, they can let us know.
Yes, 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 yes. So you can email, if you want to email me directly, you can email me at jen@awlpartners.com. If you have questions with regards to the series or you have questions with regards to AWL Partners, then you can email hello@awlpartners.com. And so, Shirley will love to answer any questions that you have. We just want to thank you so much for spending time with us. Remember, mindset is everything. And that's why we started with mindset. If you think something's not going to work, it ain't going to work, right? So we've got to really start reframing ourselves and not allowing the inner critic to have as much control as we might have let it. Okay. So thank you again. Again, if there's any questions, email us. We'd love to be able to respond. And again, thank you for being here with us. Take care.